Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and as you can see I've got the wonderful tie-on, and we've got the Top Hollow daytime music going on in the background, and you know what that means. Now, it's not exactly as it usually would be. It means that we've got some Pokemon Sleep news, but I don't have a nice page to show you for this one because it's rather interesting, because this is interesting data mined information. So, first, I want to talk about some of the changes, the balance updates. We now have confirmation on what Absol's adjustments are going to be, or what they are, because they've already been implemented. As you can see, its inventory is now 21. Before that was 18. They increased it by 3. That's a pretty significant boost to its inventory. It's not helping Absol that much if it has the apples, because these procs are just absolutely ginormous, but especially with the cacao list, that could actually be somewhat significant to helping it not fill up so fast. Then, however, big change, frequency. Before it was 3100, now it's 2950. This is roughly a 5% decrease in the time between helps. Or, it's roughly a 5% increase in productivity. It's like a 4.9% decrease in the time between helps based off the math I did earlier. But basically every Absol gets like 5% more than what it used to, based off its frequency increase in both ingredients procs, skill procs, and berries. These say unsettled, but they didn't say they were going to change these numbers, so I imagine these are going to remain settled. The Rain on X team is just doing their due diligence to make sure that these numbers actually are the same as what they were before, and they're still gathering data to verify that. But there should have been no reason for them to alter these numbers at all. So yeah, now I want to talk about the meta changes, or the changes to cooking, per se. And that is with the new meals that were introduced. We got Mold Breaker Corn Tiramisu here. It's got coffee, it's got corn, it's got milk. Not much to really say about this meal, as there are literally no Pokemon in the game right now that have any real synergy for this meal. And in terms of meals, it's more kind of mid-game in comparison to other meals that we have. It's interesting because this Jigglypuff's Fruity Flan used to be the top meal in the game. I believe overall, someone correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe it used to be the top meal in the entire game. And now we consider it almost kind of mid, when these other ones are like kind of similar in strength, and we're saying they're mid meals. But Mold Breaker Corn Tiramisu is coming off a little bit more powerful than the Early Bird Coffee Jelly, but as I said, there's no real nice synergy. As you can see, all these Pokemon here that are being suggested for it by the calculator for meal coverage, which for those of you that don't know, Ranax has a little tool here for that. All these Pokemon here that are suggested for meal coverage are pretty much exclusively mono options. Because there just isn't anything that has both coffee and milk, or coffee and corn, or corn and milk. There's zero synergy here, so I can't imagine that many players are going to be really making this. If you are at the point where you'd be making this, and you have, say, the perfect Beware, the perfect Vikavolt, the perfect Blastoise with double milk in the first 2 slots, you know what? Make it. It's what you got. Use what you got. But I can't imagine this is going to have any real impact, other than it's a free 20 diamonds for those of us that take the time to make it once. But the real interesting one is the Clodsire Eclairs. Now, looking at this, you'd say, okay, uptick in AAA Blastoise, because for the longest time, milk has notoriously been that one ingredient that kind of just exists. You didn't really need an ingredient specialist for it, because there were no meals that took a boatload of milk. It was like, I think 14 was the highest milk requiring meal before this point. And now it's 26. That's almost double what it was before. So that is significantly more. The need for a milk farmer now may actually exist. If you've invested in a milk Blastoise, then I'm sure you're ecstatic about this change. But unfortunately, it also takes 30 cacao a day. And unless you have a cacao Blastoise, or unless you have a cacao Absol, you're probably investing in a cacao Blastoise, because there aren't really that many options for cacao right now. Now, that could change with Paldean Wooper. There's a lot of theories as to what Paldean Wooper's ingredients list will be and what specialty it will be. but I'm not so sure it's guaranteed it'll be this, or even that, like, we'll just have to wait and see, is my conclusion there. If it has cacao, then maybe Milk Blastoise is the way to go. But uh, there's something interesting in having the milk at the base level and cacao twice, which, because it provides a bit more meal coverage, which, when I evaluate for that, it actually likes the AAB Blastoise the most. And interestingly, the AAC Vikavolt, because as you can see, coffee and honey here. I think they were trying to get some synergy with this when they made the early bird coffee jelly. It was the only meal that took both coffee and honey to try and give that Vikavolt a little bit of the synergy, but players primarily just focused. Oh, mono option. The C ingredient sucks. There's no synergy there. That's completely useless. There is the synergy in a mid-tier meal, but if you have a Vikavolt, you're probably looking towards late game meals. So that synergy is really just, that value is lost. Well, now the biggest meal in the game has both honey and coffee in a way that the Vikavolt provides a lot of coverage for it. So there's something interesting here. Now, I still think a lot of players are going to invest in primarily just mono options for Vikavolts, just because it is the best coffee farmer by quite a long shot, as you can see here. 92 versus 73 down for the Aggron for these sub-skills and my settings. That's a pretty big difference, but you are able to theoretically get an Aggron that could produce a decent amount of coffee, so if you do that, then maybe there is grounds for investing in a mixed ingredient option of an AAC list on a Vikavolt. I'm not suggesting it, first off and foremost, but there's something here in terms of synergy. And I wanted to discuss that, because it doesn't really get discussed all that often, because a lot of players look to just the mono meta. And I think that there's something interesting here going on, that the devs are trying to key us in, that, it's powerful to cover 2 ingredients in a single Pokemon. And look, you can do that with a Blastoise over here. Now, neither Vikavolt nor Blastoise will perfectly cover all these ingredients all at once. They'll need supplementing from other Pokemon on the team, or they'll require that you use the bag wisely and prep in advance before getting that dessert week. But there's still potential for just covering one of the strongest fields in the game and potentially just 2 Pokemon. I haven't run the numbers to see what the sub-skills it would take, or how much backstocking it would take to be able to do that, or if you could just supplement with, say, an evolution. That's another discussion as well. But there's something very interesting going on here, and I love how synergistic this meal is and the approach they've taken with it, because I think it's pretty neat, the chocolate, milk, coffee, and honey. So, I also want to talk about the biggest winners that I feel are in this update, and I think the biggest winner of this, honestly, is Blastoise. A lot of players were running it for ABB anyway, and now that is just all the more viable. If you want this to make this Clodsire Eclair, you're going to need 90 cacao a day. That is absurd. And as you can see with Help Speed M and Ingredient Finding M, with the ABB list, Blastoise produces about 75 per day. But this can get even better. It can get even closer. Let's say you get inventory in there. Makes just a little bit more, like 84. And then you just get something with a help bonus, 2 of those on the team. You can easily get that up to 90, especially if you're running a good camp ticket. So it's totally valid for producing the cacao aspect of it. And whereas the Absol will definitely clear the cacao if you have decent sub-skills in nature in the mono list, the Blastoise, like I said, will produce a little bit of that milk on the side, which just provides all that little bit more coverage that makes it easier to make the meal. That I think, honestly, this is a bigger Blastoise win than it is an Absol win. A lot of players right now are talking about how, this is just separating Blastoise versus Absol further. Because you're going to need, in order to produce enough cacao, you're going to need the mono cacao Absol to invest in, or Clodsire if it turns out to be cacao. And you're going to need the mono milk Blastoise to invest in for the sake of producing this milk. I think an ABA option or ABB option, ABB especially, can clear this cacao while also just producing a little bit of the milk on the side. And maybe you could continue running things like your evolutions for that milk. You don't necessarily need the Blastoise, or you could just run or stockpile milk so that when you have it on an event week, You can run easy travel tickets to get the desired meal type, and then you can run this meal with your prep. There's a little bit of risk there, but it's very rewarding when you do get the right meal type for what you've prepped. And I've talked about that before on my Power of the Bag video. I will link that in the description if you want to learn more about that. Now, and if I don't, remind me. Tell me in the comments, and I will add it afterwards. I forget quite a bit. Now, other things that I want to talk about is other big winners of this update. Things that I think are big winners. And that is Eevee, first and foremost. All the Eeveelutions are theoretically getting a buff by being able to supplement the Blastoise in producing the cacao or the milk. I know me personally, I have 2 mono milk Eeveelutions. That is awesome. Anything, as long as it doesn't have that C ingredient, they're going to be producing just a little bit to aid the production to potentially get it past that threshold, so you don't have to run necessarily another ingredient specialist, or you could easier stockpile. I think especially Flareon and Glaceon could be interesting for this purpose, just because they're going to be increasing the pot size, so maybe you could be making it on a non-good camp ticket week, because then you're expanding the pot size. Now, notably, you would be needing to get 2 procs per meal to be making this meal, because the maximum pot size right now is 69. Their skill increases the pot by 31, that's 100, and this meal takes 102. So you're not going to be able to make this meal with just a single proc off of an evolution, so do note that. But there's something interesting as well with that. I think there's also something to be said about the Jolteon. Jolteon is very good at proccing on other ingredients or other Pokemon on the team, therefore forcing a set number of procs. That works especially well with slower Pokemon that do better by proccing higher strength procs, or like having a higher ingredient rate. That works really well with the Blastoise, because 27.5% ingredient rate is pretty high as a base rate. With some modifiers, that makes it even more insane. It's going to be producing a decent amount of cacao and milk when aided by, say, a Jolteon, especially since the Jolteon can furthermore produce milk and cacao to aid it too. Vaporeon's always good when talking about meal production, just because of the way its skill works. Just brings in lots of ingredients, can fill that pot. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the Eeveelutions that I think are interesting for this purpose, of potentially aiding in that way. But then also I want to talk about Pawmot. Pawmot also notably has cacao and milk, which I think is very nice for that synergy, especially as an energy for everyone healer. The only other real significant options are Wigglytuff, who notably has honey but then oil. I'm not sure what its C ingredient is, but it has honey and oil, I know. Actually, I think it's cacao. If it's cacao, then that's also kind of a winner here, too. But honey is in that meal, as well as cacao, as well as the coffee. So having these 2 ingredients is just nice for the Pawmot. As well as, I think Meganium is coming out winning here. Now, we've always talked about Meganium as being a Pokemon that has an interestingly high value procs for a berry specialist, especially at level 30 and level 60. It's got 3 honey. There aren't that many berry specialists that proc something that produces 3 at the level 30 proc. I think, let's see. I'm interested to see Raichu. Raichu procs apples, which is the weakest ingredient. What is Raichu's list? I just want to see. Yeah, even Raichu procs 2 apples at level 30, which apples are the weakest ingredient of all of them. So for Meganium to have a 3 honey proc is very significant on a berry specialist. Granted, its ingredient rate's kind of low, but these size of procs kind of make up for that. So it actually can output a decent amount of honey and cacao when you're looking at it that way. And if you look at the meal coverage rate, once again, you wouldn't be relying on the Meganium to produce this stuff, because it is a berry specialist first and foremost, but it has that extra coverage that makes it actually rank pretty high up here in terms of how much it can provide coverage for the meal. Right up here, right above a Heracross that has mono honey, and obviously any mono list non-ingredient specialist for any of these ingredients is going to do pretty well. at just providing extra coverage. But the Meganium having a mixed list that uses both ingredients, I think adds extra value to it. Or it's more likely that you have a Meganium that can be useful for this purpose. Because really it's only leaks that can mess it up, that it wouldn't be aiding in this production. So yeah, I think those are three of the biggest non-ingredient winners that can further aid in production of that highest tier meal. But the final thing that I wanted to discuss is this thing that was sent out by RainOnX, or DuraNonX, like one of the primary devs of the RainOnX calculator, one of the most powerful tools in the game. Check it out. It's linked in the description of every single one of my videos. This is the link. But he said that in this data mine, they found some very interesting stuff. One is the Muna line, Muna and Musharna, potentially being added. Very, very potentially being added. This is from a data mine that they aren't actually in the game yet, but they found some data that led to a trace of it. They also saw an additional event included in the app update. Now, this dates back to kind of like, I think they data. I'm not too well educated in how the data mining process works, but I know back when like the Suicune event was first announced or something like that, or the Water Week or whatever, somebody found a list in the code of all the different events, and it's how they actually predicted Old Gold Power Plant's release, because they found a named event in one of the files that was the same name as the Lapis Lakeside event's release. I'm assuming that the way that they found this event was a very similar way, and the event was titled something along the lines of Psychic Week. That is ginormous if this is true. Now, granted, this is very, very preliminary, but there is some data mining, and it's from RainOnX. If there's anybody that knows what they're talking about, it's RainOn. Especially when it comes to data mining. This is like the most reliable source for making predictions in this game that we can have. They're the developers of the site that was almost every other link here. And they're saying that there's likely a psychic event coming shortly after Valentine's event, which last time we had type event, any type listed then event, it was in preparation for a new legendary. Because then a week later they gave us downtime in between, and then it was the legendary event after that. When it came to the release of Electric Week, Fire Week, and Water Week. Then 2 weeks later after each one of those was Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, respectively. So, that means likely Psychic Legendary. Now, that's a lot of different potential Pokemon, especially when they line up with, like, sleep themes. You could theoretically have, like, Jirachi, a lot of people like Mew and Mewtwo. I think those could be interesting. And then, there's also the whole discussion of Cresselia Darkrai, one of my favorite theories, a theory that I've talked a lot about on this channel. I think Cresselia and Darkrai would fit the theming of Sleep very well, and they'd provide coverage for the last two islands that don't have legends currently. I think it all kind of makes sense. I think they've been giving a lot of attention to Dark-type Pokemon lately, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's the route they go with it. I personally am hoping that's the case, so that my theories turn out to be true, but they are just theories. I'm not so sure what they mean by we also likely will have a total of 6 packs. I think that's talking about the bundles, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If somebody has any more information on that, let me know. And then they also said a custom variant of a Pokemon. This was later confirmed to be Paldean Wooper. It had to do with the IDs. Basically, every Pokemon in this game has an ID listed, and the way that they handle regional forms is event forms, they have like 9,000s, and then regional forms, it looks like they have 7,000s. Paldean Wooper was in the code as 7,054. They found that number before they found Paldean Wooper, so they just made this announcement saying that. They later said that, but now they've confirmed 7,054 is in fact Paldean Wooper. So that's what this little custom variant of a Pokemon is. That's what that is. But Muna and Musharna, Psychic types added to the game, potentially, not confirmed, but potentially Psychic types that are going to be added to the game. Psychic for the longest time, since they added Steelix, which was like one of the first Pokemon. I think it was Mr. Mime was the first Pokemon they added to the game after launch, and then it was Onyx Steelix was the second thing. I'm pretty confident that ever since Steelix was released, Psychic type has been the only type in the game to not have a Berry Specialist. So I think it's very high likelihood that if this is real, if this actually happens as it appears in the code to us, these are probably going to be Psychic Berry specialists. And then a little bit more speculation about Clodsire. I kind of skipped over this on accident. I wanted to mention that they did said Pokemon who collect fancy apples, cacao, and rousing coffee are going to be boosted. I think that's very interesting that they called out apples because neither of the new meals include apples. So I think that leads us to believe that these 3 ingredients, the reason why they called them out specifically, is because these are Paldean Wooper's ingredients. Don't know the order, don't know the amounts, don't know what's base. Like, I think that it's pretty confident to say that the reason why apples were included here, even though they're not in either of the meals, is just because it's included in Paldean Wooper's list. If I had to guess, my guess would probably be like cacao, coffee, apples is probably the route that it's going to go. But that's all speculation. A lot of this is speculation. Except for this, there's a little bit of data behind this as well. A little bit of data mining that they did. So, yeah, go check out Rain on X. They're some pretty smart people. They know way more about data mining and finding this stuff out than I do, even though I talk about it quite a bit. But yeah, that's pretty much everything to be discussed. Some very interesting stuff that's happening on the World of Sleep. I probably wasn't going to discuss the new recipes for a video just because I kind of felt like new recipes is kind of, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Well, there's a lot more than I first thought when I actually started diving into it. But then I saw this announcement by Raynon and was just like, okay, I got to talk about this because this is actually big. Potential Psychic Legendaries. Theorize what you guys want. There's a lot of Psychic type Legendaries in the game. I think they actually outnumber Dragons potentially. Correct. Which a lot of people think there are a lot of Dragons, but I looked into it and I think there's actually more Psychic types. But that's a whole different discussion. If you have enjoyed the video, maybe learned something, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I always try to cover the news as fast as possible. Today was a little bit slower because this was last night, but I was really busy yesterday, so I didn't quite get around to it for like 24 hours later. But still try to post around as fast as the news drops. Do a little bit of research and then post it for you guys to know. So if you subscribe to the channel, that's the way to get the fastest news notifications aside from obsessively checking the app like I do. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.